You are going to be taking notes on multiplying integers. You'll be doing this on the sheet of lined paper that you received. At times you might want to pause the video so you can take time to write. You can also rewind and make sure that you understand. Start by labeling the top of your paper with this label, multiplying integers. Next, you're going to want to make a foursquare. You're going to need several lines per square, and if you write with a bigger font, even more than what I have. The first type of problem that we're going to talk about is the kind that you learned in probably second or third grade. A regular 2 times 3. In elementary school, you learned that this meant you have 2 groups of 3 items. If you were going to show that with floats and anchors, you would list 1 group of 3, 1, 2, 3, and 2 groups of 3, 1, 2, 3, in red for your floats, which would equal 6 items. That's pretty basic, and that's the first multiplication that you ever learned. As we get further into math, however, we have to start thinking about what it looks like to have 2 times negative 3. When we have 2 times negative 3, we really have 2 groups of negative 3. If I were going to draw that with my floats and anchors, because I had 2 groups of negative 3, I would take my blue, or my anchors, and list 1 group of 3, 1, 2, 3, and a second group of 3, 1, 2, 3, which would give me a total of negative 6, or 6 anchors. It gets a little confusing when we have the negative first, at least confusing when we translate it to words. A negative that comes first really means you're going to flip whatever your total is. In other words, we're going to take 2 groups of 3, and then we're going to flip it to the opposite sign. To try and show how this works, I listed 2 pictures. What the problem would be before we did this flip, and what the problem is after the flip. If it's asking us to flip 2 groups of 3, the first thing I did is I listed 2 groups of 3. Regular 3, meaning positive 3, and those are floats. Now, if you imagine you have the fancy floats and anchors that I brought into class later that are laminated, if I were to flip each of these over, on the back side of each float would be an anchor. So by flipping, I end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 anchors. We're going to look at the next example, our last example, similarly. We have negative 2 times negative 3. If we put that into words, this negative means flip 2 groups of negative 3. In other words, find two groups of negative 3, flip them over, and you'll have your answer. Again, if you can imagine that you have the fancier floats and anchors, if I take two groups of negative 3, I have my first group of negative 3, or 3 anchors, and my second group of negative 3, or 3 more anchors, and then I have to follow orders and flip those over. I would end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 floats, or positive 3.